Well, I was being a dietitian in a hospital, and I took a course at the University of Utah for midwives, and I learned Touch for Health. And the head cook at the hospital I worked at had terrible, terrible pain. And I said, well, maybe I can help you. Halfway through the energy balance, his pain was gone for the first time in years. And I was like, oh, I was just so shocked. But it changed my life. It changed my life. Made me very popular at the hospital. And it changed my life, and it made me go to acupuncture school. And I just became like this passionate, like, women and people need to have this medicine. So I went through 4 years of graduate school in neurophysiology, and I was young. I just thought, well, if we understand how it works, then we'll just do it, right? I didn't understand the politics of medicine. I didn't understand what gets researched, what doesn't. So then I just decided, by then I was finishing up my PhD, and I said, you know what, let me do what I'm good at. I'm really good at working with people. Yeah, so while I was being an acupuncturist, my husband worked at St. Joseph's College, and he introduced me to William Bengston. And, you know, I'd go to parties at his house where people who'd cured cancer. And so it was very real to me that cancer was very curable with energy medicine. I knew somebody, you know, Bengston could do it. And, you know, he and my husband worked together. And so all during Bengston's mouse experiments, I felt like I was sort of kind of a tangential part of that, because my husband would come home and tell me the latest, or we would go to some function and that sort of thing. Every time I was with Bill and I would say, how do you do this? I was a hotshot acupuncturist, right? I had all this training in energy medicine. I was slightly clairvoyant. I was very that. But so when he told me his technique, I didn't believe him. I didn't believe him. I just said, well, that can't be true, because it's just positive thinking. Like that can't work. And I sort of had to hit a wall with my own career until I sort of humbled myself to say, you know what, Bill gets results that I don't get. Maybe he knows something that I don't know. What Bill does so far with most of his students is he has a 2-day class or 2.5-day class, and he teaches his technique. But what I learned from him was how to manage a natural healing tumor. And that's priceless, because it took me a day to learn how to cycle. You just have to kind of discipline yourself to do it. Sort of like learning a musical piece. If you practice enough, you can get it. If you're like a pianist or a guitarist, you're awkward at first, but if you practice, you'll get it. But knowing how to make the judgment calls with a naturally healing tumor, I feel like that's the greatest gift that I got from Bengston. Cancer, it's like the cells are looking for themselves, and they just keep growing. And when they're met by this energy that is them, they go, oh, wait a minute, I don't belong here. And they suddenly have the information they need to die. And they want to die. All of us have cancer cells in our body all the time, and our body is very eager to kill them, and they're happy to go. I mean, that's a metaphorical, of course, but it's first time there was a cancer cure with me. I don't like to say I cured his cancer, because he cured his cancer. I had like a little crisis. I got sick for a while. It's like like if this cancer went away and maybe I had something to do with it, like why don't all my other problems go away too? It felt like I wasn't making it happen, which is exactly true. My ego didn't make it happen. Welcome, everybody. This is Suzanne Clegg of Spirit Gate Acupuncture. I'm the author of There Is Another Way, Energy Medicine for Pets with Cancer. And I'm here today with Joseph Cullen. And one of the many things I do, I'm an acupuncturist, so I treat people for their aches and pains. I'm a sound healer, so I'm a medical intuitive, and I'm able to sense what's going on inside people's bodies. I do distance healing. I'm a nutritionist. I'm an herbalist. Been doing natural health for about 35 years, my whole career. And recently, in the last 10 years, I've been working with the Bengston Energy Healing Method. And Joseph found me on the internet, and he said, can you help me learn this method? And I understand that Joseph is a naturopathy student and a nutrition student, and he's just super interested in healing. And as we were working together, I was helping him learn the method. I just loved his questions, and like he'd get into these tweaky little details that were so important. And I thought, rather than just doing this one-on-one with him, why don't we do this more publicly? Because his questions are so great. So I don't really know exactly what he's going to ask me today, because I just trust him to ask me good questions that will further both of our both our audience's knowledge of what goes on with this healing business, and maybe we'll discover something new in our conversation too. So
that'll be cool.
So hi, Joseph.
Hello everyone. Yeah, so I do have a keen interest in healing and medicine and alternative medicine, and also in how the findings of scientific research can be translated into practice. And so that's sort of what you've been doing for a long time, I think, probably all through your career. And you, like you said, you started in a similar area to where I did. I think you started in nutrition and dietetics.
I started there, and then I did 4 years of graduate school in neurophysiology, so I really got into the nitty-gritty of basic research. I did basic research for a while at Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. I do have that scientific researcher mind, and my idea of a good time is to go study something and learn something. So, yeah.
And so those were probably the early days of nutrition and of nutrition science and dietetics becoming mainstream, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it was being a dietitian in the hospital in 1980 was like you were just marking menus. You had 5 years of college degree, you knew all this stuff about nutrition, but nobody was asking for it. The doctors didn't, they thought you were a menu mark. Nobody knew. So you were constantly educating people on very basic stuff, like chemicals might not be good for you, or just like, anyway, it was just amazing the depth of ignorance and apathy towards nutrition. Now it's the trending topic, and everybody's trying to not everybody, but a lot of people are they're appreciating that you can do so much with food, and that food is medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did your career evolve from nutrition to energy medicine?
Yeah. Well, I was being a dietitian in a hospital, and I took a course at the University of Utah for midwives and holistic healing or something, because the midwives were going to attract a bunch of people that were into alternatives. So if you were a midwife, you needed to understand the lay of the land. So I took this course, and I learned Touch for Health. And I remember I took this weekend workshop as part of this class, and the head cook at the hospital I worked at had terrible pain. And I said, well, you should try acupuncture. He says, no, I don't like needles. I said, well, maybe I can help you. So I went there, and I looked at my book, and then I pressed the parts of his body where he should do, and I did this muscle testing thing, and I was very insecure because he was my employer, and I was young, but halfway through the energy balance, his pain was gone for the first time in years. And I was like, oh, I was just so shocked. But it changed my life. Made me very popular at the hospital. And it changed my life, and it made me go to acupuncture school and decide that then I had a series of acupuncture treatments that completely stopped my menstrual cramps and made it, gave me back my life, that week of the month. And I just became like this passionate, like, women and people need to have this medicine. So I went through 4 years of graduate school in neurophysiology, and I was young. I just thought, well, if we understand how it works, then we'll just do it, right? I didn't understand the politics of medicine. I didn't understand what gets researched, what doesn't. So then I just decided, by then I was finishing up my PhD by coming to New York to work on asthmatic sheep because asthma responds very well to acupuncture.
Oh, wow.
And the sheet lost their funding and all sort of fell apart. And I said, you know what? Let me do what I'm good at. I'm really good at working with people. You know, I'm smart enough to do basic research, but really like being with people. So that's when I finished up my acupuncture degree, which I'd started back in Utah. And that was 1991 when I finished that. So I've been doing acupuncture since 1991.
Right. You probably would have seen quite a bit of science come out in that time.
Yes.
Since 91. I think there's
Yes.
quite a lot more science on acupuncture than I was really aware of.
Yeah. No, it's people who think that you have to believe in it to work just don't understand it. So.
Well, yeah, that's one of the big points of Bengston Method healing, isn't it? So maybe we should get to Bengston Method healing.
Yeah. Yeah. So while I was being an acupuncturist, my husband worked at St. Joseph's College, and he introduced me to William Bengston. And I'd go to parties at his house where people who'd cured cancer, and so it was very real to me that cancer was very curable with energy medicine. I knew somebody, Bengston could do it, and he and my husband worked together, and so all during Bengston's career of all his mouse experiments, I felt like I was sort of kind of a tangential part of that, because my husband would come home and tell me the latest, or we would go to some function and that sort of thing. But every time I was with Bill and I would say, how do you do this? I was a hotshot acupuncturist, right? I had all this training in energy medicine. I was slightly clairvoyant. I was very that. But so when he told me his technique, I didn't believe him. I didn't believe him. I just said, well, that can't be true, because it's just positive thinking. Like that can't work. And I sort of had to hit a wall with my own career until I sort of humbled myself to say, you know what, Bill gets results that I don't get. Maybe he knows something that I don't know.
Right.
And I mean, I was always respectful of him, but I tried his technique, and I just didn't really follow up and say, what about this? What about that? I didn't do to him what you're doing with me right now, which is asking the tweaky little questions that make all the difference, whether it works for you or not. You have to really care about it. So I had my list, and I couldn't figure out how to hypercycle. I couldn't figure out how to turn it around, but I didn't ask Bill for like 10, 20, I don't know, a long time, at least 15 years. Took me, people say, how long did it take you to cycle? I go, about 15 years. Because I was in that world with Bengston, but I was not learning it.
Okay.
And finally I hunkered down and I said, I'm going to learn this. And I learned it in a day. So it just took, like I needed to do it now. And that came from a deep place inside of me. It's like some switch happened inside me and said, okay, you're going to learn the Bengston Method now.
So you had a chat with Bill, and he gave you some more definite choices.
Yeah, then I enrolled myself in his training, and then I started bringing my patients to him. And so I would give him, like my patients would get like 5 or 10 treatments from me, and then we would go over to Bill and he would watch me treat them, and he would critique my technique and help me understand what was going on with the cancer. So what Bill does so far with most of his students is he has a 2-day class or 2.5-day class, and he teaches his technique. But what I learned from him was how to manage a natural healing tumor. And that's priceless, because it took me a day to learn how to cycle. You just have to kind of discipline yourself to do it. Sort of like learning a musical piece. If you practice enough, you can get it. If you're like a pianist or a guitarist, you're awkward at first, but if you practice, you'll get it. But knowing how to make the judgment calls with a naturally healing tumor, I feel like that's the greatest gift that I got from Bengston.
Right.
Because I didn't know what, the tumors would cool down, they'd heat up, they'd grow, they'd shrink, they'd do this, they'd do that. The people would have these questions. He really mentored me, and and I became somebody who knows how to handle cancer. And I don't think there's many people like me. So, and in some ways, I work with people a lot. So then I started doing his technique with things that weren't cancer. So I've really been working then it sort of morphed into my own thing because, you know, the supervision with Bengston became like, I think I kind of know what I'm doing now. So I don't really need to like bother both of us. You know, I think I know what I'm doing. And so, you know, since then I've had just practice and encountered successes and things that didn't work the way we wanted them to. You know, my failures I've learned so much from. And I just like, when it starts happening again, I go, oh, okay, that didn't work well the last time. So in my next patient, I'm able to say, no, this is important. We need to address this. And that clinical experience with cancer is what gives me the confidence to do my work.
Yeah. So, yeah, so you seem to have taken Bengston Method healing, which on its own is a fairly simple thing. And there's a training CD set available as well. And I went through that and then I contacted you as well. And so you've sort of taught me a bit more about the hands-on real-world application of it.
Mm-hmm.
And in your practice, you seem to have taken it to a whole new level where you've integrated your own intuitive abilities and expertise and experience and your other background in energy medicine and acupuncture and whatnot.
Yeah. No, I would say that Bill's expertise is research, brilliant statistician.
Yeah.
I respect him profoundly.
Mm-hmm.
And my expertise is that I've been working on bodies for 35 years. My hands know, my heart knows. I just get these sensations. It's a fuller experience than applying a method to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you know, it's a part of what I do now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'd like to ask you a bit more about your experience of actually using this to heal people with cancer or other ailments, because the science shows that this is a reproducible and reliable cure for cancer in mice, at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
And anecdotally in humans as well. And so you said that you can feel like when it's working, when it's not working, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a bit more about that, about the actual experience of healing and how you actually apply it to people?
Okay. Right. Well, there's a couple, not everybody responds to this. Okay. So the mice in Bengston's experiments were set up to be the perfect patient. They were relatively young for their normal lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
They had rapidly growing tumors, and they could receive the treatment. They were like captive. They had no choice. And what else is the other one? And they responded to it. If they hadn't been responding, they would have done something different. But in humans, my experience with humans is that if I can find somebody that's relatively young or just not at the end of their normal lifespan, they respond beautifully if they haven't had chemo or radiation, which cuts out 99.9% of the people, because it's not really, you know, there's not enough clinical evidence. There's enough mice evidence, but there's not enough clinical evidence. And it's still sort of fringe that if your family is telling you to, you know, go get chemo and you're not feeling good about that, but you need their support, and you're scared because you have this friggin' tumor growing on you, in you, you tend to just, you know, you're like falling down a cliff. You just pull at whatever might help you. And right now the mainstream machine for cancer is what's there, and so people gravitate towards it. But I can't tell you how many people have come to me. They get freshly diagnosed. They come to me and I put them on the table and I do the Bengston method, and usually there's an area of their body which is very quiet and cold, and usually the tumor area is very hot. And I do the method on them, and there's a sequence of how you put your hands, or actually there's not a sequence, but there's a knowing of how to look, which I think is beyond what you're asking right now. and usually the tumor cools down. It's like when I'm doing it, it feels like their body is singing and humming and receiving the treatment. And then the tumor cools down. Sometimes there's a cool breeze, almost very reliably. Even with like leukemias and things like that, there's usually a hot spot, even though it might travel around from treatment to treatment. There's usually some sort of heat that cools down. And then there's this profound sense of well-being. And the shivers, because the coolness is sometimes, I think it might be like a mild fever. I've never like stuck a thermometer in somebody's mouth, but
is this
they did that.
Is this heat like normal heat, or is it something slightly different?
If you can't feel it, like if a complete muggle, somebody who's not at all energetically sensitive at all, can't feel the difference, then, but I can tell that it cooled down because I'm super sensitive. That gives, then I say, I don't, inwardly, I don't say, I say the right thing for the right patient, but like if it cools down where their wife or their husband that came with them can feel it and like, oh my gosh, it cooled down, of course I can feel it. Then I give them an A for responding. If it's this subtle kind of cooling down, like, maybe it cooled down or I can feel it, but they can't, then I give them a B. And if I really have to hunt, then I give it a C. And what I find is that those same people, they run off and get chemo, and then they come back saying, okay, I just want to like blend this with my Western medicine. It doesn't work. Or I have to really deep, and the changes I feel are very subtle. I still think I'm giving them palliative care. I feel like I've done very good work with people who've had chemo, but the chemo is much stronger. Usually the chemo interferes, I think, like my scientific hypothesis is that the chemo interferes with the DNA of the tumor. And if the DNA of the tumor is being messed with, the healing process of apoptosis, of just voluntarily killing yourself because you don't belong there anymore, if you're a cancer cell, can't happen. So the healing that I might be doing on a person that's in the midst of chemo feels more like psychospiritual transformational work, just like the regular stuff that a lot of therapists can do. And I think it's super important and very, very beneficial and might help the chemo process work, but it stops working. The Bengston thing, the very reliable thing where I'm giving them an A, like, okay, good, we're on the right track.
Well, these methods they seem to work in opposite ways, really, don't they? Like chemo and radiation generally kills cells, whereas this Bengston healing seems to stimulate some kind of healing process somehow.
I work a lot in metaphors, and the metaphor that seems to be is that when I'm bringing healing, first of all, I'm not the healer, but if I touch someone in this therapeutic way, I'm like connecting, I'm helping them remember their connection to source, to their whatever information field, vibrational field. This is not a religious thing. It's just a language. It sort of has, anyway, it feels like I'm introducing themselves to themselves again. It's like,
yeah, and that's another thing. That's one thing I found really interesting watching some of the videos on your YouTube and things. People will say that after they've had a healing session, they'll feel more like themselves.
yes.
I find that really interesting.
If you think of cancer, it's like the cells are looking for themselves and they just keep growing. And when they're met by this energy that is them, they go, oh, wait a minute, I don't belong here. And they suddenly have the information they need to die. And they want to die. All of us have cancer cells in our body all the time, and our body is very eager to kill them, and they're happy to go. I mean, that's a metaphorical, of course, but it's
yeah. And you use the word information there too, which I think is a key word, because from a scientific perspective, what is this? Is it energy? It involves energy, it seems to, but is it information? Does it work on some quantum physical level or biophysical or beyond quantum physics or who knows what?
Well, it's not electromagnetic. So one of the big questions people get, they say, oh, your hands get so warm. And I'm like, well, that's not the healing. Because Qigong, you can do the ball and you can create a ball of light and you can do that. And it does have therapeutic benefit. It really does. It doesn't cure cancer though. The information that is and you can feel the warmth, you can feel the magnetism in your hands when you feel, and a lot of the sensations I might feel on a person's body have that magnetic feeling, but I can generate that from my ego, and that is not healing. So one of the biggest things that I teach my students and what I practice as a therapist is to have an open heart. Certainly I want to help somebody, but to tap into this quietness, that's a vast quietness inside me that's also inside my patient. And there's a spacious quality to it. And it's a doing without doing, that old Taoist saying. I think I know how to do that. There's layers to knowing how to do that. And beginners are very good at healing because they know that they don't know. And so but they're just experimenting. And so they're not attached to it. They're not like thinking they're the great healer of the North. And they're able to do very, very well. So,
and that they're open to however it working.
Yes. And they don't know if they'll succeed or not. So they're like, okay, let's give it a whirl, but then let's see what happens. So beginners are very, very powerful healers.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, because when you're beginning to learn Bengston's method and the rapid image cycling, and I think you as well, when you began, you don't feel like you're doing anything. And so it's like, am I doing it right? I don't know.
First time there was a cancer cure with me. I don't like to say I cured his cancer because he cured his cancer. I had like a little crisis. I got sick for a while. It's like like if this cancer went away and maybe I had something to do with it, like why don't all my other problems go away too? It just felt like I wasn't making it happen, which is exactly true. My ego didn't make it happen. And what's so great about Bengston's method is it's actually a tool that it's much more than an ego distraction, but it does have that component in it where you're there and you're not there at the same time. And that's a part of it. It's actually, I could talk forever about each little part of it.
I'm sure we could. Yeah.
So.